Hey there! Welcome back to Color and Craft Haven, a little corner of calm where we can slow down, breathe, and add a little color to the day. Today we're talking about something that sounds incredibly technical, but is actually one of those sneaky little art concepts that follows you around no matter what medium you're using. Whether you're coloring with pencils, working with markers, experimenting with pastels, or even just smudging something accidentally and deciding to call it a technique, blending is everywhere. It turns out that while different mediums have their own personalities, many of the principles behind blending are surprisingly similar. Think of it like discovering that your cat, your dog, and your toddler all have different appearances but share one important trait. They become suspiciously interested the moment you sit down with a snack. Different creatures, same principle. Art mediums work much the same way. One of the biggest misconceptions beginners have is believing that every medium requires completely different skills. They buy colored pencils and learn pencil techniques. They buy markers and assume they have to start over from scratch. Then they buy pastels and suddenly feel like they've entered a foreign country where nobody speaks the language anymore. In reality, many blending concepts transfer beautifully between mediums. The tools change, but the underlying ideas often remain remarkably similar. The good news is that every time you learn blending in one medium, you're secretly building skills that help you in others. The bad news is that you'll have fewer excuses when that art supply purchase somehow finds its way into your shopping cart. But it's educational only works so many times before even you stop believing yourself. But at its core, blending is simply the process of creating a smooth transition between colors, values, or tones. That's it. No mystical secret, no ancient artistic prophecy, no hidden society of colorists meeting under moonlight to guard the sacred blending knowledge. You're basically helping one color become friends with another color. Sometimes they're eager to cooperate. Sometimes they're like two relatives at Thanksgiving who haven't spoken in 8 years. Your job is to help them coexist peacefully on the page. Whether you're moving from dark blue to light blue or from orange to yellow, blending creates visual softness and realism. It helps objects appear rounded instead of flat, and gives artwork that polished look that often makes viewers think you know exactly what you're doing, even when you don't. Let's start with one of the most universal blending principles: gradual transitions. This idea shows up everywhere. When working with colored pencils, you build layers slowly. With markers, you overlap colors while the ink is still workable. With pastels, you gently merge neighboring colors together. In every case, you're avoiding abrupt jumps whenever possible. Imagine walking up a staircase versus trying to jump straight onto the roof. One method is smooth and controlled. The other ends with questionable life choices. Color transitions work the same way. Small, gradual changes generally create more convincing blends than dramatic leaps from one extreme to the other. The more intermediate steps you create, the smoother the final result tends to appear. Another principle that applies across almost every medium is patience. I know, nobody wants to hear that. Patience is the broccoli of art advice. Everyone knows it's good for them, but they'd rather hear about shortcuts. Unfortunately, blending often rewards slow, steady work. With pencils, rushing can leave harsh lines. With markers, rushing can create streaks. With pastels, rushing can turn a beautiful gradient into something that resembles an explosion at a chalk factory. The artists who achieve those dreamy, seamless transitions usually aren't using magical supplies. They're simply taking their time. They build color gradually, observe what is happening, and make adjustments along the way. It's less exciting than discovering a secret hack, but works far more consistently. Pressure control is another blending concept that shows up nearly everywhere. Colored pencil artists quickly learn that pressing harder creates stronger color, while lighter pressure creates softer layers. Pastel artists often discover similar relationships. Even marker users experience versions of this concept through stroke speed and layering choices. Learning to control pressure gives you far more influence over how colors interact. Think of it like seasoning your food. A tiny pinch of salt can improve a dish. Dumping the entire container into the soup creates a very different experience. Art supplies respond similarly. Sometimes a gentle touch produces the smoothest blend. Sometimes stronger application is needed. The key is recognizing that your hand is constantly communicating through the medium. One of my favorite universal blending lessons is learning to trust layering. Beginners often expect the first layer to look finished. They place a color on the page, stare at it for 3 seconds, and immediately conclude that everything has gone terribly wrong. Experienced artists know that ugly stages are normal. In fact, many blends look awkward halfway through. Colors can appear patchy, uneven, or even downright strange before adding additional layers that bring everything together. This happens with pencils. It happens with markers. It happens with pastels. It happens often enough that it should probably be printed on art supply packaging. Warning: temporary artistic panic may occur during the middle stages of blending. Learning to keep going instead of abandoning the piece is a skill that benefits every medium. Value transitions matter just as much as color transitions. When people hear the word blending, they often think exclusively about color. But value, which is the lightness or darkness of a color, is equally important. Imagine blending bright yellow into bright orange. The colors change, but the values remain fairly close. Now imagine blending white into black. That's mostly a value transition. Every medium relies on smooth value changes to create depth, dimension, and realism. Rounded objects, folds in fabric, clouds, fantasy landscapes, and even simple coloring book illustrations become more convincing when values transition naturally. Sometimes the secret to better blending isn't choosing different colors at all. It's paying closer attention to light and shadow relationships. Let's talk about color overlap, because this concept shows up constantly. In many mediums, colors don't simply sit beside one another. They interact. Colored pencil artists often layer one color over another. Marker artists frequently overlap adjacent colors to create transitions. Pastel artists blend neighboring pigments together. This overlap zone is where much of the magic happens. Instead of treating colors like separate territories with heavily guarded borders, successful blending encourages cooperation. The overlap area becomes a negotiation table where colors work out their differences. Occasionally, they create beautiful harmony. Occasionally, they create mud. Learning which color combinations blend gracefully is part of the adventure, and occasionally part of the comedy. Speaking of mud, every artist eventually creates it. This is practically a rite of passage. If you've never accidentally produced a mysterious brown-gray blob while attempting a gorgeous sunset blend, your time is coming. Nobody escapes forever. Muddy colors often appear when too many incompatible colors are blended together or when blending continues beyond the point where it's helpful. This lesson applies across mediums. More blending isn't always better blending. Sometimes artists become so enthusiastic about smoothing transitions that they blend away all contrast, all texture, and all life. Good blending isn't about removing every visible difference. It's about creating intentional transitions while preserving enough variation to keep the artwork interesting. Texture is another concept that transfers surprisingly well between mediums. Not every blend needs to be perfectly smooth. In fact, some subjects benefit from visible texture. Fur, stone, bark, clouds, weathered wood, and fantasy landscapes often look more convincing when some texture remains visible. Colored pencils may leave subtle stroke patterns. Pastels may retain soft grain. Markers can create interesting layered effects. The goal isn't always perfection. Sometimes the goal is character. Think about homemade cookies versus factory-produced cookies. The homemade version may have irregular edges, but those imperfections often make it more appealing. Artwork can work the same way. A little texture can add charm and personality. One of the most comforting realizations artists eventually have is that blending is not a single technique. There's a collection of related skills. There isn't one correct way to blend. There are dozens, maybe hundreds. Every artist develops preferences. Some enjoy extensive layering. Some prefer burnishing with pencils. Some love marker transitions, Some adore the soft, atmospheric quality of pastels. The important thing is understanding the underlying principles. Smooth transitions, controlled pressure, thoughtful layering, patience, value awareness, and color interaction form the foundation. Once those ideas become familiar, moving between mediums becomes far less intimidating because you start recognizing the same concepts wearing different costumes. Another principle that crosses medium boundaries is observation. I know that sounds less exciting than discussing fancy supplies, but observation is often the secret ingredient hiding in plain sight. Many blending problems are actually seeing problems. We think we're blending incorrectly when the real issue is we're not noticing what we're trying to recreate. Look at a photograph of a sunset or a fantasy castle or even a simple apple. The transitions are rarely as dramatic as our brains imagine them to be. Colors often shift gradually. Shadows contain unexpected hues. Highlights fade softly rather than appearing as stark white patches. The better you become at noticing subtle transitions in the real world, the easier blending becomes regardless of whether you're holding pencils, markers, pastel, or whatever shiny new art supply followed you home last week. Now let's talk about edge control, because this is one of those concepts that quietly influences almost every piece of artwork. Some edges should be soft and blended. Others should remain crisp and defined. A common beginner mistake is trying to blend absolutely everything. Suddenly, every object has the visual clarity of a photograph taken through a foggy shower curtain. Not every transition needs to be smooth. Sharp edges help define forms and direct attention. Soft edges create atmosphere and distance. The real magic happens when both exist together. Think of a fantasy landscape. Distant mountains may have soft, blended edges, while the dragon nearby gets stronger, sharper definition. The contrast between those edge qualities helps create depth and visual interest. Temperature transitions are another fascinating area where blending principles overlap. Warm colors and cool colors interact in powerful ways. A sunset might transition from warm yellows to cool purples. A snowy landscape might contain subtle shifts between cool blues and warmer reflected light. These transitions happen across virtually every coloring medium. Understanding temperature relationships can dramatically improve your blending because you're no longer just moving between colors randomly. You're creating intentional emotional effects. Warm colors tend to feel energetic and inviting. Cool colors often feel calm and distant. Learning how to blend temperature shifts gives you another tool for creating mood. It also gives you another excuse to spend 20 minutes debating whether something is slightly blue-green or slightly green-blue. One thing that surprises many people is how much blending relies on restraint. We often imagine artistic success as adding more and more information. More colors, more layers, more effects, more everything. But sometimes effective blending comes from knowing when to stop. There's a moment in many projects when additional blending no longer improves the piece. In fact, it may begin harming it. The challenge is recognizing that moment. This can be difficult because artists are naturally optimistic creatures. We frequently convince ourselves that one more adjustment will solve everything. Then another adjustment follows, then another. Suddenly, a beautiful blend has transformed into a cautionary tale. Learning to walk away occasionally is one of the most valuable artistic skills you'll ever develop. The paper itself also deserves some attention because every medium interacts with the surface differently. Yet even here, familiar principles emerge. Smooth papers often support smoother blends. More textured papers tend to create more visible texture. Colored pencil artists notice this. Pastel artists definitely notice this. Marker users encounter it as well. The interesting part is that understanding how surface texture affects one medium often helps you understand how it affects another. It's like realizing that driving on ice is slippery whether you're a compact car, a pickup truck, or a delivery van. The vehicle changes, but the road conditions still matter. The same is true with art surfaces. The page is an active participant in every blend you create. One of the most useful mindset shifts for hobby artists is understanding that blending is a practice skill, not a talent skill. Nobody emerges from the womb flawlessly blending colors. Imagine the absurdity of that scene. A newborn arrives, grabs a set of colored pencils, and immediately demonstrates museum-quality gradients. That's not how any of this works. Blending improves with repetition. Every page teaches you something. Every experiment provides information. Even failed attempts have value because they reveal what doesn't work. The artists you admire have usually spent years making mistakes and solving problems and gradually refining their techniques. The beautiful blends you see online are often standing on top of entire mountains of ugly practice pages that nobody ever posts. This is especially important for adult beginners because many of us secretly expect ourselves to be good immediately. Children seem perfectly comfortable creating questionable artwork while proudly announcing it as a masterpiece. Adults, meanwhile, make one imperfect color transition and begin questioning every life decision that led them to pick up a pencil. There's something wonderfully freeing about approaching blending with curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of asking, "Why am I bad at this?" try asking, "What happens if I try this differently?" That tiny shift changes everything. Suddenly, you're exploring rather than performing. You're learning rather than proving. And frankly, you're having a lot more fun along the way. Another overlap between mediums involves building confidence through small experiments. Many artists save blending practice for major projects, which is a little like deciding your first driving lesson should happen during a Formula One race. Small test swatches are incredibly valuable. Try color combinations. Experiment with pressure. Explore layering sequences. See how different transitions behave. These little exercises remove much of the pressure because nothing important is at stake. You're simply gathering information. Over time, these experiments build a mental library of experiences that follow you from medium to medium. You begin recognizing patterns and anticipating results. That confidence makes future blending attempts feel less intimidating and far more enjoyable. Something I particularly love about blending is that it naturally encourages mindfulness. When you're carefully transitioning one color into another, your attention tends to settle into the present moment. You're watching subtle changes. You're adjusting pressure. You're observing color interactions. It's difficult to worry about tomorrow's grocery list while deciding whether a particular section needs one more light layer of blue. Blending has a way of gently pulling us into the now. That's one reason so many people find coloring and creative hobbies relaxing. The process requires enough focus to quiet mental noise without demanding so much concentration that it becomes stressful. It's a pleasant middle ground where creativity and calm often meet. Fantasy art lovers often benefit especially from understanding transferable blending principles because fantasy subjects often involve dramatic color transitions. Dragons may have glowing scales. Magic forests might contain shifting light effects. Wizards seem contractually obligated to stand near mysterious glowing objects. Understanding blending helps bring those scenes to life regardless of the medium you're using. The same principles that create a smooth sunset can help create magical energy. The same layering concepts that shape a realistic apple can help shape an enchanted crystal. Once you understand the fundamentals, the possibilities expand dramatically. Suddenly, you're not just learning techniques. You're gaining tools for visual storytelling. Perhaps the most encouraging thing about blending across mediums is realizing that every creative skill reinforces the others. Time spent with colored pencils teaches lessons that help with markers. Marker experience improves your understanding of color transitions. Pastel work strengthens your awareness of values and layering. The skills build on one another like pieces of a puzzle. You don't have to start from zero every time you try something. You're bringing experience with you. That means every coloring page, every sketch, every experiment, and even every happy little accident contributes to your growth as an artist. The learning is cumulative, even when it doesn't always feel that way in the moment. So the next time you sit down with your favorite supplies, remember that blending isn't about mastering the same formula. It's about understanding a handful of powerful principles and learning how they express themselves through different tools. Smooth transitions, patience, observation, layering, pressure control, value awareness, edge management, and a willingness to experiment all play important roles. Whether you're using pencils, markers, pastels, or something entirely different, those ideas remain remarkably consistent. The medium may change its outfit, but the underlying lessons stay surprisingly familiar. And if your blend occasionally turns into a muddy mystery that seems capable of absorbing nearby light and hope, don't worry. In fact, congratulations. You're officially making art. That's it for today's colorful time. I'd love to hear which medium you enjoy blending with the most, or whether you've discovered a blending trick that works across multiple supplies. Leave a comment and share your experience with the rest of us. Take care, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one.